They want us to talk about 1969.
Right.
But it seems a bit difficult to start with 1969 without talking about what a mess 1968 was and how it ended with a White Album where, you know, Ringo tells the story of going to all the Beatles, saying he felt like an outsider, and all the Beatles said, well, I felt like an outsider. Mm-hmm. He left, and it wasn't until they bought up every florist shop in London that Ringo would come back. Talk about how tough it was getting past the White Album, even making it to 1969 as a group, that they were fraying by that point.
Yeah, well, it was, first of all, I mean, they had developed themselves. Right. You know, from being four guys that had been working together in Germany and back streets of London and struggling. Well, it was a struggle all the time. People think that they just made it. Right. But it was taken a long time to do all that. And I think that they really, then they met their wives and they had families and they were not always together like they were, like four kids in the school. Right. And so therefore they went, it was very hard for them, and I think that after Brian died, you know, it was all a case of what do we do now? And this was difficult for all of us. And
you were with Brian even from the record store in Liverpool, before the Beatles. I mean, you were there from the very start.
Yes. And the first time I heard them was when Brian, by this time we had two shops, the original one which Brian had given to me to run, and the new one. And Brian said to me that he'd just been to see this group in the Cavern, which everyone told him he should go and see. And he said, they're really interesting, they're really good, you should come and see it. And I said, do I want to do that? You know. And so they, of course I did. And right. I wasn't initially I wasn't as impressed by them as Brian was. Right. But I soon got my act together and realized there's a bit of a history to Liverpool, which is very important because it was a major port, the biggest port in Europe in those days. And what happened was the boys, when they came out of school, which would probably be at 15 in those days, a lot of them would go into the merchant seamen, become merchant seamen, because that was the way they could see the world. They get paid for doing all of this, and they came back to Liverpool with a few bucks in their pocket. But the other thing is that they also got to listen to American music, which you couldn't do in England at that time because there was BBC, which had needle time, which was very little, wasn't it?
Yeah, a couple hours a week.
Yeah.
They couldn't play records. You had to listen to Radio Luxembourg, which was very fuzzy. And you know, it's important to remember, and this is something we may talk about, but how much of this was based on our admiration for American music and kind of America in general. I mean, we were in black and white, post-war, depressed. You know, we had rationing until about 1956. You know, but it seemed to us that America, across, you know, all the way across the Atlantic, was the opposite. It was Technicolor and shiny and perfect, and everyone had perfect.
We have proved you wrong. Proven you wrong, my man. It took us a while.
That's true.
But we did.
But at the time,
let's go to New Zealand.
Exactly. We looked at everyone had perfect teeth, and you know, everything was wonderful. But in particular, we fell in love with the music.
Right.
We all had skiffle groups, folk music, jazz, rock and roll. We loved it all. And I mean,
country and western.
Country and western, very much so. I mean, until the Beatles started writing songs, which they turned out to do rather well. I doubt they ever played a single English song.
It was
all based on American music.
You listen to some of the covers, like you really got a hold of me. Yeah. I mean, Money, it's extraordinary covers. Chains. I mean, we could go down the list.
Twist and Shout.
Of course, Twist and Shout.
Reinventing
it. Brothers.
It was a Beatles song.
Unbelievable.
Reinventing all that material that they internalized and learned how to play from listening to. They turned it right back, and it's of course well known and well documented and they put their own spin on it. Yep. So if you listen to the Isley Brothers and then you listen to the Beatles' Twist and Shout, they didn't write their own. They wrote songs in those days, but the covers were, it was their stage show, and they did it brilliantly.
We'd moved to this building that we bought because we had so much money at the time. And we did that, and that was a bit of a struggle.
Yes.
Being in that building and trying to record, because going to Abbey Road was where they started, and it was a creative, wonderful, sacred place.
Right.
So trying to record in other places was not quite the same.
Right.
But they did that, and I think that possibly when Get Back had not happened, the idea of, and I must say, to give it Paul credit, most of it, and so much of the time, particularly in the last few years, it was Paul's drive that got everyone to get it.
After Brian. After
Brian,
passed away, it was Paul that sort of pushed everybody.
And it was very, very difficult because when Brian died, we all felt, what on earth are we going to do now? You know, because it had been a family and we all worked together. And so it was very, very difficult. And Paul, I remember, he went, I had to go to the funeral. I didn't have to, I went to the funeral. And I wouldn't let them come because of the paparazzi and everything.
Right.
So, but the day I got back from the funeral, Paul said, we have to get together, we have to sit down. And so he pushed us into having a meeting the following day at Ringo's apartment in the central London. And nobody was really focused on this because they were still stunned by Brian's death. And I remember, if I can go off a slight tangent, I was chairing the meeting. And so in the end I said, can we have a coffee break? And so we came, and I just got up and walked across the room. I was looking out of the window, like in not seeing anything, just because I was still upset about Brian and the responsibility which was coming to me. And suddenly I felt somebody hugging me from behind. Put his arms around me, hugged me. And he said to me, "Are you all right?" And I said, "No, I'm not." And it was John. And it was John, and I were best friends with Brian. And John, as much as nice as the other three are, it was John that understood what was happening to me, because it was happening to him.